Alright, so in the last video you were quickly introduced and acquainted with the Hypershade, but we didn't go into anything in too much detail. That's what this video is for. We're going to go into some of the stuff from the Hypershade in detail. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's open up that Hypershade again. Again, I'm using a hotbox to open it up. Alright, so we're back here in the Hypershade. So let's go over some of the most commonly used and some of the most important items and features and tools here of the Hypershade that you're going to find yourself using over and over and over again as you work with your projects inside of Maya. Probably the most important thing when working with the Hypershade that you need to know is how in the world to create different shaders and nodes. Okay, so there's a lot of ways that we can do that. I'm going to show you probably the simplest way of doing it and the most straightforward way of doing it. If you notice over here on the left, we have this area over here. This is called the Create Toolbar. And the Create Toolbar allows you to do, as the name suggests, create different nodes and shaders inside the Hypershade. So for example, you can actually click on one of these nodes. For example, let me click on Blend over here. And when I left click on it, you notice that a new Blend shader with the default name Blend 1 is created right here in the Hypershade. It's also placed in the work area down here if I have the work area open, which in my case I do. Okay, and if I click on Anisotropic, creates an anisotropic shader with the default name Anisotropic 1. If I click on Fong, it creates a Fong shader. If I click on Surface shader, it'll create a Surface shader, etc., etc. Makes a lot of sense, right? Pretty straightforward, pretty simple to use. And you also notice that these shaders and nodes are actually categorized pretty nicely for you. So here we have surface shaders. Okay, if I click on surface up here, it collapses that menu. If I go ahead and click on it again, it expands it. So we have volumetric shaders here, we have displacement, we have 2D textures, 3D textures. Some of these are procedural. We can also go to 2D textures and click on file here to open up a texture that we created in an image editing program such as Photoshop, Corel Painter, or even the GIMP, if you're familiar with that. And we have some environment texture nodes here. We have lights, some general utilities. We're going to be using some of those to do some more advanced shading networks later, but we're not going to get into that right now. We have some color utilities here. We have a whole bunch of different nodes. And there's so many nodes here. If you start exploring this on your own, one thing that you're going to notice is, wow, there are a lot of nodes here inside of Maya. But it gets even better. See up here where it says Create Maya Nodes? If you left click and hold down the left mouse button, you get this secret submenu, and we can switch to Create Mental Ray Nodes. Now, if you don't have the Create Mental Ray Nodes option here, it only says Create Maya Nodes. Don't worry, Maya is not broken. What happened is that the Mental Ray plugin is not loaded up. If you need to load it up manually, it's pretty easy. Just go to Window, go to Settings and Preferences, go down to Plugin Manager. And in Plugin Manager, you have all these different plugins here to load up. What you want to do is look for the plugin called Maya to mr.mll. Mine is already loaded. If it's not loaded for you, go ahead and activate it here simply by clicking on a check mark. And you might want to turn on auto load as well, so it just loads up automatically from here on out. And then just hit close. And now if you come over here to the Create Toolbar and left click and hold down the left mouse button on the Create Maya Nodes button here, you should get the Create Mental Ray Nodes option down here. And when we switch to that, the Create Toolbar switches to a toolbar that has exclusive Mental Ray shaders here. Okay, that can be used with Maya. So if we go ahead and expand the materials section, you notice there's all these different materials here for Mental Ray. And if we go ahead and expand shadow shaders, we have that. We have volumetric shaders. We've got textures down here. We've got lens shaders. We've got all kinds of different shaders. And there's so many that literally the number of combinations is pretty staggering. It would be impossible for me to go over every possible combination of shaders and material networks that there can be. For those of you who are more mathematically inclined, if you went ahead and did some math here to try to figure out how many possible combinations of shaders and nodes there could be using these Mental Ray and Maya nodes, the combinations would probably run into the millions, if not more. Okay? So it would literally be impossible for me to show you every possible combination of shader networks and material networks that are available to you in Maya. But at least the good thing is that you have so many nodes to work with here. And once you get used to this, after this training product, you'll be able to go in there and start creating your own shader networks and modify them and create your own materials for your own scenes and projects. So again, the most important thing with the Hypershade is the ability to create nodes and create these shader networks. And one of the easiest ways to do that is by coming over here and using this Create Maya Nodes or Create Mentor Nodes toolbar over here on the left. Okay. Another way to create nodes also, you can hold down the right mouse button over here in this area of the Hypershade, and you get this menu that comes up, and you can go down to the Create menu, and you can create here all the nodes that you need. As you can see, again, there are a lot of nodes. You can also come over here to the main menu, Create Item here in the Hypershade, and it's the same menu as before. We can just go ahead and create nodes from here. So if you're more of a visual person, you like seeing icons, you can use the Create toolbar over here on the left. If you're not so inclined to use that, you can also use the right mouse button menu here. Or you can come up here to the main menu item in the Hypershade and create your nodes from here. So 3 different ways to create your nodes inside the Hypershade. When working on big production scenes, a lot of times you're going to have tons and tons of different shaders here in your Hypershade, and you may have to organize some of this just to keep things nice and clean and neat. One way to do that, you'll notice up here you have this Create tab, and next to it there's this Bins tab here in the Create toolbar. The Bins tab is actually really neat because what it does, it allows you to organize things almost like a file cabinet, and you're putting away all your papers for taxes and things like that, which stinks, by the way. But here you have your master bin, and that is the default bin. That's where all these nodes and shaders end up going into. Okay, but you can create other bins. You can go over here and click on this left icon here, which is the Create Empty Bin icon, and then I can name the new bin. So say, for example, I'm working on a scene of, I don't know, an alien planet, and I want to create a bin just to contain the textures of the terrain for this alien planet. So I'm going to organize this alien planet by putting the materials for the terrain in one bin. So I'm going to call that terrain. Hit OK. And maybe another bin will be called, I don't know, characters or vehicles or weapons or whatever it is. Okay. And what you do is you just go ahead and select any of these shaders here. Say, for example, these 2 shaders, the anisotropic 1 and the blend 1 belong in the terrain bin over here. All I have to do is select them here and just right click on top of the terrain bin here and simply go to Add Selected. And I can add those in. So when I click on the terrain bin, only the shaders and materials and nodes that are inside the terrain bin are displayed to me. That way it keeps things more organized and more efficient. It's a pretty neat way of working. Okay, and when you want to, you can just select, say, the blend shader here, right click on top of the terrain bin over here, and simply go to Remove Selected. So we can do different things like that. Okay, and if you go ahead and click on this right mouse menu here, you can see we have different options here. We can rename the bin, we can duplicate it, we can empty it out. We can also delete the bin delete the bin completely, and we can do different things like that. So it's actually a very neat way of working, very organized. I encourage you to work as organized as possible in 3D. Doesn't matter if you're working in Maya or any other 3D software. Always try to be organized. It's extremely important and will actually save you time and energy in the end. And it's also best to do if you're working in a team with a lot of people. They're going to love you a lot more if you are very organized. If not, you may end up finding your tires slashed in the parking lot later at 5 o'clock. So be careful with that. Really depends on where you work at. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm going to take this terrain bin. I'm just going to right click on it and delete it. Don't really need it anymore. And if you notice, deleting the bin doesn't delete the shaders or the materials that are inside the bin, so don't worry about that. That's actually a good thing. That way you don't accidentally delete something that you need. Okay, let me go back to the Create tab over here. Another important thing is how to go ahead and visualize and view the different nodes over here. Okay, we have different ways of displaying our nodes. Up here, we have our sort of tabs here that we can go ahead and classify these different things in, and Maya does that automatically for you. So objects that are classified as materials, such as this blend node here, this Lambert, and so on and so forth, are going to be placed in this materials tab up here. Then we have a textures tab, We don't have any textures in this scene, but if we did, the textures would appear in this tab. And we'll get to see that later in further videos once we start working in production scenes. Then we have Utilities tab, we have lights, cameras, shading groups, etc., etc. Okay, so any objects that belong to any of these classifications of items inside of Maya are going to be placed in the corresponding tabs just to keep things nice and organized. Down here we have one tab, the Work Area tab, and this is where you actually take nodes and you can move them around, like so. You can move them, you can connect them with each other, and we'll see how to do that later on. We're not going to get into that now. Okay, so don't worry about that. We can also switch views here. Right now we're in a split view where half of our view here in the Hypershade is dedicated to our standard view up here where we can see all of our materials or textures, utilities, and so on and so forth. And then we have the work area down here where we can actually grab shaders, move them around, plug them into each other, and do different things like that. Okay? And if we go up here, we'll see that there's these three icons. The first icon on the left is to show top and bottom tabs. The next one is to show bottoms only, and the next one shows only the top. Okay? So if you only want to see the work area because you want to concentrate on working on your shader network and you don't really need to see this top area, you can just click on the middle button here. And now you'll see that the work area over here pretty much takes up the entire space here of the Hypershade. Okay? And if you click on the other icon here, we can show just the top area here, which is the area that contains all the materials and shaders in our scene. So it's very important to know how to switch between those. So you can go to a split view, you can maximize the bottom work area, or you can maximize the top area as well in the Hypershade. Okay? You also notice there's this little checkerboard icon over here. If you don't need this create toolbar over here, or you don't want to work with it at all, maybe you decided you're going to work with the right click menu over here to create your nodes as opposed to working with the create toolbar, you can actually do that. You can get rid of this toolbar completely simply by clicking on that checkerboard icon. So you can see that the create toolbar disappears completely, which gives you more space to work with here with your shader networks in your work area and such. So it can actually be pretty useful. I actually tend to go ahead and turn that off when I'm working with Maya most of the time. I really don't need that too much, except for every now and then I might turn it on. Okay? We can also change the size of these different swatches up here, these different little icons here that represent our shaders. We can actually change the size of them. We can actually go ahead and click on these icons that you see over here. So we can click on this big blue sphere here, and it'll make the icons to the largest size. We can click on the next one up here, which makes them a little bit smaller, kind of a medium size. Then we can make them small, and then we can make them extra small. If you don't like icons, what you can do is click on this button over here, which is the View as List icon. And that basically allows you to see these different materials and nodes as lists. So all you're going to see is this sort of long rectangle with the name of the node displayed. You won't actually see a swatch. I like to use the swatch though, so go ahead and click on this icon button just above it, right up here, this little blue sphere inside a gray box, so you can see the swatch. I actually enjoy looking at the swatches, though rendering out the swatches can sometimes slow Maya down a little bit, depending on the complexity of your scene, so just keep that in mind. But for most intents and purposes, I like to keep it on. Then over here we have these four buttons here. You see this one, it says A to Z with a little red arrow, and then we have these other three. If you hover over them, you'll get a little tooltip. The first one lets you sort your different nodes by name. The next one lets you sort your nodes by type. So if you have different types of nodes, if I go ahead and click on that, well, right now it's not going to make a difference. But if I had different types of nodes here, it'll go ahead and organize them by type. I can also sort them by time. So basically, it'll sort them in chronological order of when they were created. So the first shader that was created will be here in the first one in the list, and then it'll go to the second one that was created in your scene, the third, the fourth, fifth, so on and so forth. Then I have this one down here, which allows me to reverse the order that I have them organized in. So instead of organizing them first by the ones that were created first, now the first ones in the list here are the last shaders that were created. Okay, I like to just leave it over here at the default, which is to sort by name. Okay, and there you go. Now I'm not going to go ahead and spend another 20 or 30 minutes talking about the Hypershade because I literally could, but I'm not going to do that because you'll probably be you'll get knocked out and fall asleep if you haven't fallen asleep already. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you in this video is how to actually apply these shaders, because knowing how to create them is great and all, but how in the world do I get them on my actual sphere? So I'm going to kind of try to minimize this a little bit here so we can see what's going on. There's the sphere in my scene. Let me just move my view around. Okay, so let's say, for example, I want to place this this blend shader on my sphere. Right now, it's using the default Lambert, which is this Lambert 1 here. Let's say I want to place this blend 1 shader that I created for it on the sphere. How in the world do I do that? Well, it's very easy. With your Hypershade open, just use the middle mouse button on your mouse, and just click on the middle mouse button and drag that blend and drop it right on the sphere. You'll notice that there's a little icon there of a plus symbol, letting you know that you're doing it the right way. And just let go of the middle mouse button, you'll notice that the blend changed a little bit there, and there you go. So it's literally that easy. Another way that you can apply shaders from the Hypershade to objects in your scene is to right-click on top of the object. When you get this right-click menu, simply go down to these 2 menu items. You can assign a brand new material, which will actually assign a new material to the object and create a brand new material. Or you can go to assign existing material, and this will show you a list of all the materials that you've created so far and the materials that exist in the Hypershade, like the anisotropic 1, the blend 1, the Lambert, the default Lambert, the Fong 1, and the surface shader 1, as well as the particle cloud 1. Okay, so these are all the shaders that are inside of our Hypershade. So we don't have to open up the Hypershade and resize it the way I did, which is kind of annoying, and then middle mouse button click and drag on top of the sphere. We don't even have to have the Hypershade open. We can just right click on top of the sphere, go to assign existing material, and I can go ahead and place that Lambert shader back on the sphere. And you'll notice that down here we got this red error that says error. No renderable object is selected for assignment. That's because I made a boo-boo. Big mistake. You have to select the object first and then right click and go to existing material. So there you go. Now Maya's happy. Okay? Just always remember to follow Maya's rules, or Maya can make your day turn real bad. Okay, so I think I bored you enough with all this talk about the Hypershade, but hopefully you got introduced to it and you really understand how to open up the Hypershade, how to create some materials, and how to do some basics of moving around in the Hypershade and changing the views and the different view options in the Hypershade, which is actually extremely important. It may not seem like it now, but when you're working on complex scenes, the last thing you want to worry about is how to work with basic fundamentals of the Hypershade. You already have enough to worry about with creating a complex scene and working in 3D, which is a challenge in itself. Alright, so that's going to do it for this video. I'm going to end this video here, and I'll see you in the next one.